Hello and welcome to Renew, the show about the College of Forest Resources at Mississippi State University. My name is Leslie Berger and I'll be your host for today's show. The College of Forest Resources promotes and enables the management, conservation, and wise use of our natural resources. Here to tell us a little bit about her research and management work in the College of Forest Resources is Dr. Heather Alexander. Thank you for joining us today.
It's my pleasure. Thank you for having me here today.
So I would like you to tell me just a little bit how you came to be in this Department of Forestry at Mississippi State.
Sure. Well, I started here in 2015 and I was hired as a forest ecologist, and so that's my expertise and background. And I really started working in forested systems when I had an opportunity to work on fire in upland oak forest in the Appalachian regions of Kentucky. And so I spent a lot of my career thinking about fire and how forests respond to fire and how fire can be used as a tool to manage forest for desired species and get rid of some species that maybe we don't want.
Okay, well that's interesting because many people probably don't look at forest fire as being a positive thing. We see all these images on the local news of these horrific fires destroying whole communities. And so could you tell me a little bit about the difference then between what we see on television and what you're doing?
Sure. So most terrestrial ecosystems, so land ecosystems, have the capacity to burn. And it's really a matter of time of when they last burn versus if they burn. The issue with the wildfires, that we're seeing out west and some of the big fires that we're having is really that it's really humans. For many, many years and decades since the 1930s or so, we have intentionally excluded fire from many ecosystems because at the time of European settlement, there were many wildfires that burned out of control and destroyed towns and forests, and people became very scared of that. And once that happened, we started intentionally removing fires from our forest. And what we realized decades later is that fire is a natural part of these systems. And if they don't burn periodically, then you get huge fuel accumulations. And this is particularly bad out west because it's dry. Things don't decompose very quickly. So when wood enters the system, when a tree dies, it stays on the ground for a long time. And then if you have an unintentional lighting of a fire, somebody throws out a cigarette or a campfire is left unattended, these fires start and they burn very, very hot. And then of course there's the issue with the wildland-urban interface. So people are building their homes and their towns in areas that are really wild areas. And once you start encroaching on that space, then more people and their property becomes susceptible. So the difference between those types of fires and what I'm doing is that we are intentionally setting fires. We are setting fires fully recognizing that the system depends on fire to be healthy and functional. And so we only set the fires when the conditions are safe. So we look at temperature and relative humidity, we look at fuel loads and their moisture, and we go in and we set up safeguards to prevent the fires from burning beyond the point that we want them to burn. And so it's a very different way of thinking about fire. We know from studying the ecology of systems that fire is necessary for many, many different plants. They have adaptations to it. They've evolved with fire.
And in the absence of the fire, then you lose those plants from the communities that they were in originally.
Exactly. And so what happens, particularly in like upland oak forest, which I spend a lot of time thinking about, you remove fire from the system and you start getting kind of weedy species, really shade tolerant, fire sensitive species like winged elm, red maple. They're really prolific, they grow everywhere, and fire is the only thing that really keeps them in check. So once you take fire out of the system, they come in, they take over, very, very competitive, and then species like our upland oaks, which we like because they produce an acorn that feeds our wildlife, they start petering out. And so many of our forests, we have lots of big oaks in the overstory, but if you look in the understory, in the midstory, there are very few regenerating oaks.
Because there's too much shade.
Too much shade, exactly.
We had some pictures that we were showing, and we've got maybe a minute or two left. But could you explain, in one of these pictures, that you are on the ground and you're looking at some frames. So what is the purpose of those frames in your research?
So one of the questions that I've been trying to answer is, how do these species that are coming in the absence of fire, how do they alter the flammability of a forest? And so they have very different leaf litter. That leaf litter curls differently, it has different moisture. I want to look at that litter. That's what we're doing in those quadrats. We're collecting it, we're measuring the traits of it, and we're trying to figure out how flammable it is compared to the oaks.
Right.
And so that's what we're harvesting. We're looking at the fuel bed.
That's very interesting.
Yeah.
We have just about a minute left, but
Sure.
in the time that we have, I know you're doing some work in Siberia.
Sure.
So can you give us just a little snapshot of how that has relevance to what we do here in Mississippi? I mean, Siberia is very different than Mississippi.
Exactly. It's a totally different world. Well, so Siberia, much of the Arctic, this tundra and boreal forest, and it also burns, but it's fires that are set by lightning, and it's very remote, so the fires burn huge areas, and the fires are so large they burn. You can see them from outer space. But what's happening is that's carbon dioxide that's going into the atmosphere, and so it's having a feedback that's influencing climate warming, and that's what we're interested in.
Well, that's very interesting. I look forward to hearing more about some of your research when we visit with your graduate student in just a little bit. We're going to take a break and look at some commercials, and we'll be back in a minute.
Want a career as big as the outdoors? Want to have an impact on the environment? The College of Forest Resources at Mississippi State University delivers hands-on training, ensuring clean air and water, wildlife habitats, and a sustainable environment. Creating new wood products and retooling old ones for today and tomorrow. Find a career in whatever path you choose. Majors in forestry, natural resource and environmental conservation, sustainable bioproducts, wildlife, fisheries, and aquaculture. Want a career as big as the outdoors? Choose the College of Forest Resources at Mississippi State University.
Discovery. It tells our history and determines our future. At Mississippi State University, we're digging deep, unlocking an understanding of our past, validating it. Middle East exploration by faculty and students is uncovering evidence that unravels ancient mysteries. Scholars have long thought of the biblical kings David and Solomon as mythological figures. Our research offers evidence that supports their existence, boosting MSU into an international league of experts on archaeology. Now we're changing the way people think about the past, opening up new possibilities of understanding for future generations. Digging deeper, learning more. Imagine a world where there's enough food to feed everyone. We are at Mississippi State University, where we ring true.
Welcome back to Renew, the show about the College of Forest Resources at Mississippi State University. Joining me now is Ms. Jennifer McDaniel, a graduate student in the Department of Forestry. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
I'm glad you're able to come. Tell me a little about the project that you're doing here at Mississippi State.
Sure. So as Dr. Alexander mentioned, our upland oak forests are experiencing some shifts away from oak dominance and towards dominance by fire-sensitive species such as winged elm and sweet gum and red maple. And so that's likely due to fire suppression and fire exclusion. And so as we see these shifts, we can expect that there will be changes in flammability and the ease of implementing prescribed fire.
Right.
And so my research looks specifically at the interactions between flammability, leaf litter traits, decomposition, moisture dynamics, and how those really impact overall flammability and forest flammability. So it's pretty cool stuff. I get to do lots of things. I have been doing some plot level experimental burns where we actually manipulate the litter that's in 2-meter plots.
Really?
And so we can burn those and then measure flame height, rate of spread, consumption, flame temperature, and things like that.
Right.
So we can get a better idea of what's happening as we actually experience changes in eastern forests.
So what do your friends and family think about you as a young woman working in a field that's historically been dominated by men? And not only are you in this male-dominated environment, but you're intentionally setting fires.
They love it. They love it, and we always talk about how funny it is, actually. But I think it's really important for women to be in the field of forestry. It's good for diversity. Diversity always brings in new ideas. I grew up in 4-H, and so I was always exposed to forestry and natural resources, and then eventually found my way to the University of Georgia, and where I majored in forestry, and then found my way to Mississippi State, working with Dr. Alexander with Prescribed Fire. And so I'm really grateful for the opportunity just to work with fire, because it is really interesting.
Okay. So where do you see yourself going next? You went from 4-H and Georgia and here. What is your next steps after this?
Yeah, so I want to work directly with landowners. We can't accomplish our conservation goals on public lands alone. Private lands are important,
Right.
And so I want to work with the public, particularly in an agency role. I think would be a good fit for me.
So how do you then take what you're learning in this research project that you're doing, Dr. Alexander, and convert that to something that a landowner can use?
Sure. So landowners are typically sometimes hesitant to use prescribed fire. We think if there's liability involved and that some people are afraid of using it, but I think it's important to educate landowners about the use of prescribed fire, and the prescribed fire is a tool. It's a management tool. It's not just setting the woods on fire. It's very prescribed. And so hopefully to educate them and actually help them use prescribed fire.
Okay, so what would you say to someone who might actually see the show and they're a landowner and they think that that's a good idea and they're going to start burning their woods? There are some rules that govern what they can do that we might need to share with that. So what would you advise them to do if that's what they want to do?
Sure. So the number one thing that I would tell someone is that always have a plan for what you want to do and an objective. So all of your management decisions should be objective driven. So it's not that you're just setting the woods on fire, that you're not just implementing prescribed fire just to burn. Actually having a goal, having an objective, make sure that you have all the right weather conditions, make sure that you have all the necessary suppression gear, make sure you have an adequate crew, and things like that are always good ideas for prescribed fire. And make sure you follow the legal guidelines.
Okay, and so if they wanted to find that information, where would they go to find that information?
So the Mississippi Forestry Commission is a good idea to start with.
Right, so that's the Mississippi Forestry Commission is what helps provide those permits and the guidance by which a private landowner would want to implement those conditions.
Yes, exactly.
That's a good point, because there are some legal things, and it's important that people understand that not to just set the woods on fire, but they have legal protection if they do it within these guidelines. And so if it does escape unintentionally, that there's some protection for that. Well, thank you for coming by and sharing a little bit about your research. I hope that those of you that joined us here on Renew today have learned a little bit more about the Department of Forestry and the role of prescribed fire in conservation of our forest ecosystems. I hope that you're able to join us again on the new episode of Renew in the future. Until then, I encourage you to get outside and enjoy the natural resources that we have here in Mississippi. I've been your host, Leslie Berger, and thank you.